Nerfs are almost here.
Hey, buddy, watch this.
That's right, it's been confirmed by Mike Dene. We are going to be getting some balance changes soon, hopefully announced this week if all goes to plan. Who knows how soon that's going to be, but I have some guesses on things that might get nerfed, and I'm going to walk you through those guesses in this video. Now, I want to be clear, I'm not saying these are things that should be nerfed necessarily, or that they should be nerfed in this way. I just tried to get my brain thinking like how Blizzard thinks and change these cards how I might expect Blizzard to do it. Now, am I going to be accurate? Probably not. They're going to throw some surprises out there, do things in some weird ways, I'm sure. But I've got some ideas, some guesses, so hopefully you'll share your thoughts on what these nerfs might look like and if my ideas are remotely close to the real thing. So I'm going to be breaking this video down in a few different sections, basically by different kinds of nerfs, and these are pretty obviously nerfs to Mage, one of the most talked about nerf targets, I think, in this expansion, one of two big ones. And although Mountain Giant here is not really a Mage card, it's still fitting in the Mage class and a centerpiece for Mage right now. So I've proposed 3 nerfs here. Again, I'm not saying these are what I would do or what I think the right things to do are, simply what might happen. And I'm not saying all 3 of these will happen, just that perhaps one of these or 2 of these might come through for Mage. So first things first, Luna's Pocket Galaxy, probably the most discussed nerf target right now. We already saw it buff to 5 mana, so I think Blizzard's not going to want to push it back on mana, like moving its mana down and then up and then down and then up, right? That's not something they want to do. It looks like they got it wrong, so instead they might change another number on the card, which is the cost reduction number. Instead of going to 1, maybe they go to 3. I don't think 2 is quite far enough. There's still a lot of things you can do with 2. 3 really reduces the chains that you can create off of things like Stargazer, Luna, drawing a bunch of 1 mana crazy powerful minions. That just starts to choke up your mana much faster. So maybe they'll push it to 3. For Conjurer's Calling, I think they'd be totally fine to change the mana cost. I think taking Twin Spell off is a reasonable idea as well, but just slowing down those Conjurer's Calling turns, I think achieves the goal better than removing Twin Spell, because sometimes just like the Khadgar first Conjurer's Calling is enough to win the game. You don't need the Twin Spell aspect as much. So moving it to 4 just pushes all that back in the game, makes them more susceptible to aggro, so on and so forth. And then Mountain Giant, kind of the same story here, pushing it to 14, so it's harder to cost reduce. Also, if that happens, there's no other 14 mana minion in the pool, so you're not going to get taunts off of your Grave Horror, and sometimes those taunts can be the difference between an aggro deck just ignoring the Conjurer's Calling stuff and having to interact with it. So in some ways, it makes them more susceptible. It slows down the Mountain Giants in general, and I think it would be a pretty reasonable change. Now, some people have come up with really creative ways to nerf this stuff, like making Mountain Giant remember its cost. If it's like a 4 mana Mountain Giant, it summons 4 drops on Conjurers. That is really creative and awesome and maybe a good fix, but it doesn't feel like a Blizzard fix to me. Blizzard doesn't want to have to go change the way interactions and codes and stuff work in Hearthstone. They want to just tweak the numbers. They want it to be simple and easy and quick, and I think these changes would achieve that, if not necessarily the best ways to do it. So now let's move on to Warrior, the other big target here, I think, for nerfs. And I've seen 2 cards talked about the most, Dr. Boom, Mad Genius, and Omega Devastator. Now, I already put out an entire video dedicated to how I would personally fix Dr. Boom. This is not how I would do it, but I think this is the most likely Blizzard outcome, which is pushing it to 9 mana. I think 9 mana instead of 8 is important because that reduces your ability to play a hero power alongside it. This means you're kind of just sitting there when you play that Dr. Boom. You're stuck. And I didn't mean to make that 5 armor. That's just a Hearth cards artifact. They put all hero cards at 5 armor. It should be 7 armor. I don't think they're going to change the armor. But as opposed to fixing the rush element, which is what I would address, I'd like limit the ability for these mechs to get rush. I think the mana change is much more natural for Blizzard. Now, when it comes to Omega Devastator, I think there's a pretty easy fix here for Blizzard that might also fix the card, which is not making it a mech. Now, that is a little bit confusing because this artwork was originally used on a different card that we all thought should have been a mech, and then that card was changed for the artwork, so it didn't have to be a mech. Then Omega Devastator came along, and it was a mech. But still, if you look at the art, there's a pilot, and I think it's weird that piloted cards are mechs. I don't think they should be mechanical. They're piloted by humans. So piloted Shredder, piloted Sky Golem, Omega Devastator, essentially, they kind of are mechs, but maybe they shouldn't be. But it would be just such a clean fix because it would reduce Omega Devastator's ability to be played with Dr. Boom Mad Genius, taking 2 trades instead of 1. Right now, it hits for 10, and then it trades into something, and it becomes this really oppressive way to control the board. If you reduce the rush impact, then it won't be able to trade into stuff, and it will really cap the card's power level. Also, you could just make it do 5. You could make it cost 6 mana. There's a lot of stuff you could do here, but maybe mech is the easy answer. It is a little bit inconsistent with what Blizzard has done in the past, so perhaps an iffy change there. Maybe they'll just make it 6 mana, but I couldn't resist just taking mech off. That's such a quick fix. So now a third card I think is a reasonable target because it's creating some really big moments in games is Prismatic Lens. Right now with Tip the Scales Paladin, that's a very powerful deck that can feel pretty frustrating, and Blizzard sometimes doesn't like feel bad sorts of cards. So just reducing the mana efficiency of this card a little bit by pumping it up to 5 slows that turn down. It makes it more likely they hit Tip the Scales. It also fixes problems with things like the crazy Feoris Paladin that's very rare but still an incredibly frustrating card to lose to. So just, a simple mana tweak here is exactly the kind of thing Blizzard likes to do. It doesn't break the function of Prismatic Lens. It doesn't ruin the deck. It just limits the power level a little bit, pushes those crazy swing frustration turns back a little bit, makes people have a higher chance of beating it, gives you more time to find removal for it in particular. So it reduces the impact of the coin. There's a lot of advantages here to make Prismatic Lens a more feel-good sort of thing to play against. So it might get addressed. So now I want to talk about some nerfs that I think are probably less obvious than the ones I've mentioned so far, but feel like the sorts of things that Blizzard might do, and they're still parts of powerful decks. So we've got Combo Priest right now, which is really, really good, and we've got all of these mages that are utilizing these freeze style effects to great impact as well. So yes, I think Frost Nova and Blizzard for Mage are sideways targets. If they don't go directly at Lunas or Mountain Giant, we might see these things impacted instead. I think Frost Nova, they know how annoying it is to play against, so they just push it right to 5, make it almost unplayable. Again, I don't think that's a good change. If I was going to change Frost Nova, I would make it say freeze all minions, not just enemy minions, so that you do have some downside in these big, crazy Mountain Giant style boards. That would be my fix, but I think 5 mana is more likely. And then Blizzard, I think they could just push it to 8. They wouldn't push it to 7, I don't think, because then it competes with Flame Strike at the same mana slot, so they'd probably just really hurt it by pushing it to 8. And that's a pretty big change and a negative change, and again, not how I would probably address Blizzard. I don't even know if I think Blizzard's a problem personally, but it does feel like the sort of card that might be on Blizzard's radar. Blizzard's on Blizzard's radar. Blizzard nerfed by Blizzard. Confusing, but nonetheless, keep an eye on that one. And then for Priest, Northshire Cleric going to 2 feels like something that's inevitable. They love nerfing their powerful 1-mana cards. Northshire Cleric has been a staple for Priest forever. So 2 mana just feels like something they would do, and I didn't change the stats there. They're hidden a little bit, but don't worry. And then Divine Spirit, another card that has really defined what Priest can do as far as finishing lethal is concerned. It's big, crazy burst damage potential with Inner Fire. It's scalable in a way that's kind of scary in a game like Hearthstone. Doubling effects get pretty frightening pretty quickly. So maybe just capping that out at +4 health. I thought about +6, but that actually sounds kind of too good on its own outside of any Divine Spirit shenanigans. So this is still, it's like an extra arms without the attack, right? It's pretty bad, it's weak, but that's typically how Blizzard does things. They kind of kill their basic and classic cards because they like lowering the power level of classic and basic over time. So these 4 cards seem like great ways to do that. I shouldn't say great because I don't know if I agree with it, but effective or efficient ways for Blizzard to solve 2 problems at once, which is knocking some powerful decks down a peg or 2 while also lowering the power level of classic and basic. Maybe a bad idea in my mind, but perhaps a likely one. And then finally, I have my just out of left field potential nerfs here, because we always see this. We'll see a few things that we expected to get nerfed, and then just some totally random cards. Like Hex, for instance, was one of those where it's like, what? Where did the Hex nerf come from? What? Nobody was asking for that. And I think there could be another one of those tossed in. And I picked 5 targets here. There are probably more. But this goes back to the idea of nerfing classic and basic cards as well. Stuff that's been staple for its classes, that's just been really powerful. You always include it, have been targets for Blizzard in the past. Each of these 5 cards, I think, meets those conditions. Now, I don't actually agree with any of these, except maybe Sorcerer's Apprentice. I could see that causing some problems historically in Hearthstone. There's been a lot of crazy combo shenanigans and stuff, and Mana Cyclone stuff. So maybe Sorcerer's Apprentice feels okay to me. The rest, I don't think I would do personally, but they don't seem that absurd for Blizzard. Expect maybe a card like this or even one of these, particularly Brawl, I think could have a target on its back given the Control Warrior problem, to just get a nerf. And Brawl even added 2 mana 2 instead of 1 because I just feel like it'd still be a reasonably good removal tool at 7 mana, so Blizzard might think that is acceptable. So those are my potential nerfs that we might see announced this week. I don't think we'll see all of them, to be clear. I'm not recommending these nerfs, to be clear, but I think they do match up with what we've seen Blizzard do in the past. I hope we only see a couple really smart, subtle, targeted nerfs. I don't want huge swings where we kill classes or we kill archetypes. I want things to remain playable, just perhaps more fun or more healthy, so that there aren't these really big, crazy swing moments in games. That's usually not good for Hearthstone players' sanity. So we'll see if any of these hit. Maybe there's some other stuff that'll surprise us. That said, I'm curious what you guys think is going to get nerfed. Share your thoughts in the comments below. What's going to get nerfed? How would you nerf it? What would you do? I want to hear your take and see if we can come on some kind of consensus here as a community for how these things are going to unfold. That said, thank you so very much for watching, and until next time, game on.